Let's go now to Obaidullah Baheer. He's a lecturer of Transitional Justice at the American University of Afghanistan. He joins us from Kabul. Obaidullah, how significant of a defeat for the Afghan government is this for the Taliban to have captured Kunduz?
Thank you for having me, Rachel. Yes, it's quite an alarming development, the fall of Kunduz. It's something that had happened 5 to 6 years ago, but it was only cleared out after American boots on the ground were deployed and the Taliban were ousted from the city. The idea is that we are waiting for a more stable and consistent military strategy to come out from the Afghan government side. The idea is there is an excuse where they have never had to face such an offensive before, and it'll take time for them to settle in. But the more cities that fall, the more difficult it would be to capture them again.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the Taliban had captured Kunduz before. Why is Kunduz so important strategically and symbolically for the Taliban?
Not only is Kunduz a large city, but it's also a major hub that connects Kabul to the northeastern sections of Afghanistan, with a lot of revenue coming in from there as well. So once you cut off supply routes for basic commodities, it'll become more and more difficult for the people in Kabul to sustain their livelihoods and for the government to not feel the pressure. So the strategy seems to be to cut off and choke off the Afghan government, which seems to be working well for the Taliban so far.
Yeah, and you talked about how more difficult it will get for the Afghan security forces to fight off the Taliban, the more territory the Taliban seizes. What are the biggest challenges facing the Afghan government right now in its counteroffensive?
The difficulty is when your enemy or the insurgents are garrisoned within cities. Urban warfare is very difficult. That negates a lot of advantages that the Afghan military forces have with regards to heavy artillery and aerial bombing. We've seen that every time the Afghan government has attempted aerial bombing of these cities, despite having asked the citizens to vacate and evict the city, the Taliban portray it as a violation of human rights and how citizens have been targeted through these bombings. So it becomes quite messy. The casualties shoot up drastically. The idea is that the insurgents can be indifferent towards the casualties and the collateral damage. However, the Afghan government cannot, which means that they are fighting with one hand tied behind their backs. All of those are limitations that the Taliban are using to their advantage, whereas earlier in the districts, the government was happy with the Taliban capturing territory so that their mobility could be negated and the government could hit them harder. Within the urban populations, it's actually a disadvantage to the government to actually go in and fight the Taliban toe-to-toe, alley to alley.
The U.S. has sent in bombers to support the Afghan government in fighting back against the Taliban. Is that having any kind of impact at all?
Look, I think there's a problem with the approach towards Afghanistan to begin with. One is that tactical bombing, though, might be a short-term solution to push back the Taliban. In the long term, the international community is really trying hard to offer incentives, play the stick and carrot role with the Taliban. The UN Security Council sort of threatened that the Taliban would become pariahs in the international community if they took over by force. However, I think all of that falls on deaf ears. The Taliban do not seem to be very rational actors. A lot of their behavior on the ground and the way they've conducted themselves in the fighting sort of reinforces the concept of the lack of rationality with regards to their approach. And maybe the sponsors and the states that are supporting the Taliban are happier with the Taliban being pariahs, because when they are, that means they are more dependent on their foreign backers, meaning that they will not have their own agency when they come to power as well. All of those are problematic areas that the international community really needs to decide and take a cutthroat decision over. This approach is very passive and it's not getting us anywhere.
Yeah, you talked about how the Taliban doesn't take into consideration at all civilian casualties as it launches its offensive in these provinces. I mean, what is the humanitarian situation looking like on the ground? You know, what is the impact that we are seeing with this?
So the Taliban have had a blatant disregard for rules of engagement, for international humanitarian or international law in general. We've seen them conduct targeted assassinations within Kabul, whereas earlier they would either be silent about it or just claim that they weren't responsible. Now we see them within minutes of attacks claiming those assassinations. We've seen the mass exodus of people from cities. People are leaving their homes. Even now, people from Kunduz have come into Kabul just to seek refuge with their family members. And it's not going to end anytime soon. These people will not have homes. It'll increase the pressure on the major cities, and without actual access from the international community, it's just going to lead up to a large-scale humanitarian crisis. But apparently, for the Taliban, the ends justify the means. So all of that is irrelevant as long as their cause is met.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Obaidullah Baheer, thank you.